The twin suns of Helios Prime blaze like celestial forges, casting searing light across the planet's rust-colored deserts. Temperatures soar beyond the tolerance of most life forms, and the colony's metal structures groaned in protest under the oppressive heat. The air shimmered with radiation. Even the Zalnari, lords of this outpost, retreated indoors, their scaled skin blistering under prolonged exposure. But the humans walked freely. Amara Kinzel stood still, her eyes shielded by polarized lenses, as she studied the horizon, her skin, tanned and glistening, soaked in the heat with practiced ease. She raised a sensor wand, scanning the atmosphere as the twin flares of ultraviolet light bathed the land. Behind her, a drilling platform collapsed in a thunderous roar, metal screaming as it split. The dust cloud rose, curling into the sky like smoke from a divine anvil. The Zalnari watched from their spires with cautious awe. They spoke in hissing tongues, unable to fathom the resilience of the imported species from Earth, fragile in appearance, but somehow thriving in this inferno. To them, humans were curiosities, anomalies adapted too quickly. They called them the children of the sun. Helios Prime was a resource world, its mineral veins rich and deep, but mining them required a workforce that could endure the extremes. The Zalnari's own biology failed them here, so they turned to humanity, hardened by war, catastrophe, and climates that broke lesser species. They didn't expect what they got. Inside the lower dome, Dr. Kinzel recorded her observations. The plant samples she collected were unlike anything cataloged. Microscopic chlorophyll clusters adapted to high flare cycles, drawing nutrients from sand particles. Her voice remained calm, clinical, even as sweat dripped into her collar. "There's intelligence in this chaos," she muttered, brushing dust from a specimen vial. Jax Varen entered without knocking. His boots clanged against the grated floor. Former Special Operations, now security lead for the human crew. His armor was dented, sun-scorched, and his face half-covered by a filtration mask. In one hand, he held a scorched circuit plate. "We lost Beacon 9B. Again," he said. "Overheating. Might have to rewire the whole relay." Amara raised an eyebrow. "That's the third today. Reactor must be destabilizing." "Worse," Jack said, tossing the circuit on the table. "Overseer says we've got one rotation to get the Sunforge back online, or they'll decommission the sector. That means us." Amara looked up. Her expression didn't waver. "You mean they'll incinerate the colony?" "Exactly. The Sunforge was a core reactor station powering the colony's operations. Without it, energy fields collapsed, shielding failed, and temperatures reached fatal levels within minutes. Normally, Zalnari engineers would handle such repairs. But they refused now, fearful of the growing instability. The humans were ordered in. Jax's team had already lost 2 workers to a coolant rupture. The others were shaken but silent. Orders were orders, and survival here had always meant doing the impossible without complaint. "You still think there's a better way to fix this?" Jax asked, glancing at her notes. Amara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled up a simulation on her tablet, an atmospheric model based on her research. "This planet isn't trying to kill us," she said finally. "It just doesn't care if we live." Jax snorted, comforting. She turned to him. "We can use that. If we can mimic the desert's thermal dissipation, we might stabilize the cooling core. I'll need biogel from the xerophytic cells we found near the ridge. Those will take hours to synthesize." "We've got 12, she replied, already packing her gear. Jax nodded. "Then let's not waste one." They moved fast. Outside, the sun dipped slightly, still intense, but beginning its long arc toward the night side. The colony's outer domes buzzed with tension. Human workers moved like ants beneath the watchful gaze of drone sentries. Every step, every command was calculated and cold. But among the humans, something else stirred. Resolve. In the maintenance sector, a crew gathered around Jax as he gave orders. His voice was sharp, clear, but never cruel. He treated them like equals, not expendables. "You know what's at stake. We get the coolant system stable, we live. We fail, we're dust. Questions?" No one spoke. "Good. Move out." While the crew readied tools and patchwork insulation, Amara isolated the microbial cultures from the desert samples. Their gel-like secretions resisted extreme dehydration and conducted heat in unpredictable ways. It was a gamble, but nothing else had worked. By mid-rotation, the internal sensors showed rising core temperatures. Warning sirens blared. The Overseer issued a countdown via external comms. Human units. Repair completion required in 11 hours. Failure will result in full environmental reset. Reset was a euphemism for sterilization, thermal purging of the entire sector. Amara and Jax regrouped at the intake valve of the Sunforge. The air here was thick with ozone. Steam hissed through every vent. She handed him a sealed ampoule of biogel. Apply this along the coolant matrix. If it works, it should reestablish a thermal buffer. He glanced at it, then her. You really think alien slime's gonna save us? I think humanity's greatest strength is turning chaos into tools. Jax didn't argue. He just moved. Their movements were efficient. No wasted words. As they worked, something shifted in Zalnari observers. They watched silently, nervously. Whispers in their language conveyed disbelief. These humans weren't panicking. They weren't begging. They were solving problems as Zalnari had deemed unsolvable. Inside the Sunforge access corridor, temperature spiked to lethal levels for most known species. Amara's suit was slick with sweat, her breathing shallow. She focused on every step, every cable, every reading. Jax's voice came through the comm, patch applied, gels holding, sensors stabilizing for now. She exhaled slowly. It's working. Outside, the first hint of cloud cover formed on the horizon, unusual for this season. Dust storm on approach. Another obstacle. Another test. Amara looked up at the sky, through the transparent dome above. The suns were descending now, not weak, but tired. She smiled faintly. We're not done yet. And for the first time, somewhere within the ranks of the aliens, respect began to stir. A dry wind cut across the colony as Helios Prime's twin suns began their long descent. What should have brought reprieve only increased the danger. The heat became unpredictable, surging in random flares that scorched metal and fried exposed circuits. The sensor towers failed one by one, their cooling fins warping under stress. Inside the central command dome, the temperature breached critical thresholds. Still the humans moved. Amara slid on her exogloves and stepped into the outer corridor, her boots clicking against the overheated steel. The gel packs in her suit strained to keep her from heat stroke. She scanned the atmospheric pressure and solar flux. It's rising again, she called into her comm. We got minutes before the pressure trip goes critical. Copy, Jax replied. His voice was distant, tight with urgency. Secondary cooling coils are ready. We're patching through a bypass to take some of the load. Amara moved fast, weaving through scaffolding to reach the biolab. The microcultures were mutating under the stress. One cluster had started producing crystalline layers that redirected energy instead of absorbing it. She documented the change with short bursts of voice data. Possible secondary application, energy refraction, must isolate. Before she could synthesize a stable batch, a shrill alarm wailed across the facility. Red light spun in corners. She opened the comms. What now? Heat vent anomaly, Jax responded. 3 sectors just shut down. I'm heading there now. In the central duct access, Jax found melted conduits and a puddle of scorched biogel. 2 human engineers knelt over the mess, eyes wide, hands trembling. Jax snapped his fingers. What happened? One stammered. It blew after we installed the patch. Did it fail, or was it tampered with? The man didn't answer. Jax didn't wait. He inspected the valve and found tool marks. Scratches inconsistent with human wrenches. His jaw tightened. He activated his internal comm. We got sabotage. Precision cuts. Zalnari work. Someone's trying to make us fail. Amara's voice came back, measured. They're afraid of what we'll prove. Afraid or angry, they just cost us hours. In the lab, Amara doubled down. She reconfigured the microcultures to compensate for the structural breach, adjusting for increased viscosity and density. The synthesizer whined as it struggled to keep pace. She didn't flinch. Jax returned, his armor scorched, one arm bleeding from a shrapnel scrape. One of the drones attacked me during the inspection. They're reprogramming our tech against us. Amara handed him a second gel ampoule. Then we reprogram it back. Together, they initiated a bypass protocol using an old Earth-coded algorithm, redundant by alien standards, but dependable. As Jax typed, lines of ancient human code streamed across the interface. The drone lights flickered, then stilled. "They're ours," he said. "Now we've got eyes." With drone assistance, they scanned the perimeter and saw a pattern. Zalnari engineers selectively disabling systems that were critical to reactor stability, but non-fatal. Just enough to ensure human failure. Jax leaned in. "They want us to break just enough to prove them right. But they forgot who they brought here," Amara replied. "For the next 5 hours, the humans worked without pause. They scavenged broken tools, repurposed cooling coils from damaged machinery, and used cargo straps to reinforce the Sunforge main compression tube. No complaints. No hesitation. Each step deliberate, each fix made permanent." Inside the command dome, Amara's voice grew hoarse as she narrated data into the central archive. New application model. Gel holds under burst test simulations. Failure threshold increased by 38%. Repeat, 38%. We can do this. Meanwhile, Jax coordinated teams of workers, his voice the anchor that kept them focused. When one collapsed from heat, he carried her to the med bay himself. No delegation, no rank, just urgency and humanity. At dusk, the pressure lines began to level out. Steam hissed less violently. The Sunforge's outer shell showed the first signs of thermal equilibrium. It wasn't fixed, but it was no longer dying. Still, it wasn't enough. Amara collapsed onto a crate, her hands shaking. Her suit was nearly drained, her vision blurred. Jax approached with 2 metal flasks. He offered her one. She drank, coughed, then smiled weakly. "It tastes like copper and salt." "It's the only thing not boiling," he said. She looked at him, serious now. "Do you ever wonder why they call us children of the sun?" Jax leaned back. "Because they think we like the heat." "No," she whispered. "Because we were born in fire. Nuclear war. Atmospheric collapse. Climate disasters. We survived them all. We were raised by flame." He stared at her, then nodded slowly. "And now we're teaching them what that really means." She opened her pack and pulled out a thin, tattered hollow diary. Something she'd salvaged months ago from the ruins of Earth's last orbital platform. She activated the final log. A young technician's voice came through. Faint, tired, but defiant. "We didn't make it to the evacuation ships. But we tried. And if this message survives, remember one thing. Humans don't surrender. Not to war. Not to death. Not to the void." Amara shut it off. He didn't die for nothing. Jax looked out the viewport at the reactor. "Then let's make sure we don't either." They rose in silence and returned to the core. Time was thinning, and dawn would bring final judgment. But in those hours, the humans of Helios Prime were more than laborers. They were engineers, survivors, innovators. They were firewalkers. They were stormbinders. They were the children of the sun. The night on Helios Prime was not darkness. It was a dull crimson twilight cast by the receding suns, a time when the desert exhaled its heat and the winds howled with lethal chill. For most, it was a time of retreat. For the humans, it was their advantage. Amara stood at the core observation deck, watching as the makeshift cooling system began to pulse in rhythm with the reactor. They had stabilized it, but only temporarily. The readings showed minor fluctuations that hinted at deeper instability. It wasn't enough to patch systems anymore. They needed to rebuild, reimagine. There was no turning back. Jax entered quietly. His eyes went straight to the data. "We bought time. Not much. Not enough to complete the full cycle," Amar replied, handing him a report. "Unless we rewrite the failsafe." "You mean override the core protocols? That'll trigger a breach response." "Only if we fail," she said. Outside, A group of humans worked in silence, dismantling the auxiliary stabilizers to repurpose parts for the heat exchangers. They moved in coordinated rhythms, communicating in brief gestures. They weren't soldiers or trained engineers. They were miners, techs, farmers, and medics. Yet here, they had become something greater. The Zalnari watched from their towers, their reptilian eyes unblinking. Counselor Zirith, a senior among them, convened an emergency conclave. His words crackled over hidden frequencies. The human anomaly grows. They adapt beyond projections. We must contain the experiment. Containment, in Zalnari terms, meant sterilization. But the humans had intercepted the transmission. Jax replayed it, the static-heavy voice clear enough. He looked at Amara. We knew they'd turn on us eventually. They never expected us to succeed. Amara and Jax met with the senior human crew in the command bay. There were 15 of them now, survivors of heatwave, sabotage, and exhaustion. Amara laid out her plan. Override the Zalnari core lock and reroute control protocols to a decentralized system based on Earth's long-abandoned quantum nodes. Redundant, archaic, but resilient. Once we initiate the override, they'll retaliate, Jax warned. We face worse, said a wiry mechanic named Harlan, his face pockmarked by burns. Earth taught us how to endure. Now we show them why we endured. The plan went into motion. Amara led the override team into the central matrix, a chamber lined with pulsating energy conduits. The Zalnari tech was clean, elegant. It rejected intrusion. But Earth's code was messy, recursive, and impossible to predict. It wormed through firewalls like living thought. Jax took command of perimeter defense. He and 6 volunteers armed themselves with repurposed mining tools and broken drone weapons. As the override initiated, the first wave of sterilization drones descended from orbit. They came without warning, silent, sleek machines equipped with heat lances and plasma cutters. Jax's team opened fire. Sparks flew as the first drone shattered. The humans moved with calculated aggression. They didn't fight with elegance. They fought like cornered predators, unrelenting, unsympathetic. Each machine they downed was another second earned. Inside the core, alarms blared. Amara's hands moved quickly, fingers dancing across keys as the reactor shuddered. Node 3 relinked. Node 4 rejecting input. Try reverse stacking the input stream. Someone called out. It'll cascade. Then cascade it. They rewrote alien code using Earth's logic, adaptability through chaos. The matrix began to hum at a new frequency. Amara gritted her teeth. It's working. Cores sinking to the human nodes. Outside, the Zalnari fleet finally intervened. 5 cruisers entered low orbit, broadcasting final warnings. Human anomaly will be terminated. Return control or face cleansing. Jax activated the outer comms. His voice was steady. We're not anomalies. We're your proof of concept. Then he cut the transmission and rearmed his pulse cannon. The drones redoubled their assault. Plasma tore through metal plating. Explosions lit the colony's edge. One by one, defenders fell, but never without taking a drone with them. In the core, Amara's screen turned green. Control transferred, she whispered. We own the forge. Jax's voice crackled through the comms. Then lighted up. Amara initiated the purge command, but not the kind Zalnari designed. Instead of wiping the systems, the Sunforge reconfigured. The new human-led system rerouted energy into the planetary grid, stabilizing it, adapting in real time to flare pulses, environmental shifts, and microbial input. Helios Prime came alive. The sudden change sent a shock to the Zalnari command. Their drones faltered, confused by conflicting protocols, now speaking a human language. Their fleet hesitated, then pulled back. In the aftermath, smoke rose over the colony, but the humans still stood. Amara emerged from the reactor chamber, her face streaked with soot. Jax was waiting, wounded but upright. Around them, survivors gathered, blinking in disbelief as the system stabilized. They had done it, without permission to fail, and without a reason to quit. We rewrote the core, Jax said. No, Amara replied. We rewrote what they thought we were. Across the colony, drones once used to monitor now serve the humans. Power flowed freely, no longer choked by alien limits. For the first time, Helios Prime was not an outpost. It was a home. The Zalnari sent no further messages. In silence, they watched. They waited. And slowly, they began to understand. This was no longer their experiment. This was the beginning of something else. The colony's perimeter, once a jagged sprawl of half-buried alloy and adaptive tarps, now glowed with controlled pulses of redirected solar energy. The Sunforge, reborn under human control, no longer bent under alien constraints. It pulsed steadily, hot, alive, and human. The Zalnari had withdrawn to orbit, uncertain, silent. Their sterilization drones lay dismantled in heaps, studied and repurposed by the very hands they sought to eliminate. Jack stood atop the South Watchtower, where the heat sensors now read stable. The air was still sharp, dry as ash, but breathable. Below him, children, born a colonist, raised under twin suns, ran between power conduits and solar spires, their laughter echoing across the cooling desert. He tapped into the main comm line. No flux on the western shield. We're locked in. Amara's voice came back, crisp, North reactor coil holding. Microbial flow is self-sustaining. No failures in the last 12 cycles. 12 cycles. Just days ago, survival was measured in hours. Now, time stretched ahead. There was room to build. In the command dome, Amara finalized the open transmission that would be beamed back to Earth's surviving relay stations, if any still listened. This is Helios Prime. Her voice began, steady and clear. The forge is secured. Colony is stable. Zalnari oversight is no longer recognized. We've surpassed containment. We've outgrown control. She paused and added, we didn't just adapt. We evolved. The message looped and launched into the void. Elsewhere in the dome, a group of engineers gathered around a crystalline slab taken from the lab. The microcultures had matured, no longer unstable. They emitted a low hum, reacting to solar flare frequencies with perfect resonance. What began as biological insulation had evolved into something new, a living conductor. Amara leaned over the slab and whispered, "What else can you do?" It was the same question humans had asked of themselves since their first fire. The answer had never been simple. Meanwhile, Jack led a team into the unexplored western ridge, where the original terraforming units had failed. They walked in silence, crossing blistered rock and wind-scour metal. At the summit, they found what the Zalnari had buried, a half-functional observation post filled with data, centuries old, on human adaptability. The recordings were chilling. Footage of Earth's darkest moments. Cities burned by orbital strikes. Underground metropolises choked in silence. Humans digging into poison-soaked soil and growing food where nothing should grow. The Zalnari had studied it all. Not out of curiosity. Out of fear. Jax copied everything. Back in the dome, Amara watched the decrypted files stream in. Pages upon pages of Zalnari analysis, predictions, and warnings. A singular theme echoed in every report. Human potential is nonlinear. Their suffering catalyzes innovation. Their limits are theoretical. Their collapse is never total. She looked out the window. Helios Prime gleamed under the returning suns. A council was formed that evening. Not a hierarchy, but a circle. Every human had a voice. Every survivor contributed. The colony was restructured not around compliance, but contribution. Engineers trained farmers in basic circuitry. Medics taught miners field surgery. Knowledge became currency. And in the center of it all stood the Sunforge, now adapted to harness microbial conductivity, solar flares, and heat vents in a hybrid system Earth had never known. The Zalnari returned once, a week later. A single emissary ship descended quietly beyond the ridge. It bore no weapons, just questions. The emissary, cloaked in reflective scales, stood before the council and asked, "Why did you not collapse, as predicted?" Amara answered with one word, "History." Jax added, "You tested our bodies, not our will." The emissary offered no threat, just a quiet nod. "You were a test. Now you are a precedent." Then they left. And for the first time in the long, bitter history between species, the Zelnari did not delete the data. They shared it, across stars, across empires. They told others of what happened when humanity was cornered, not destroyed, not contained, but tested. Soon, other colonies began reaching out. Not just humans, species once oppressed, once limited by Zelnari design. They asked for help, for guidance, for the code, for the story. And Earth's children answered. The Sunforge became more than an engine. It became a beacon. The term Children of the Sun no longer described heat-hardened colonists. It meant those who could rise through fire, through constraint, through design, and still choose to build. Humans became the ones others looked to when systems failed, when empires fell, when the void threatened to erase meaning. Not because they were invincible, but because they refused to vanish. They didn't erase the past, didn't shy away from their own extinction scars. They wore them, learned from them, evolved through them. And on Helios Prime, where nothing should have grown, life flourished. The colony thrived, not as a product of perfection, but of refusal. Refusal to die, to break, to obey. That refusal became legend, and in time it became law. So when new settlers arrived, seeking shelter under harsh suns and impossible odds, they were greeted not with orders, but with a question. Are you ready to walk through fire? Because if they were, they too could become something more. They could become children of the sun.